Lord of Mysteries. My Identities Echoes Across Time. Chapter 221 to 230. Could it be because my melee scholar potion was instantly absorbed? Lynn rubbed his chin, unsure. He then explained to Klein, who was staring at him in confusion, I don't know what went wrong. Perhaps it was due to the influence of the Angel of Secrets. I just advanced to Sequence 8, and the melee scholar potion was almost fully digested. The only reason I delayed the advancement was that I didn't have the materials to prepare the Warlock potion. Klein was at a loss for words for a moment before saying, your Warlock potion isn't almost digested too, right? No, the Warlock potion isn't very digested. Maybe it's because I'm not much of a Warlock. Lynn shook his head. His Warlock potion hadn't digested much, which wasn't surprising given that Lynn had never quite fit the image of a Warlock. However, playing the role of a Warlock wouldn't be difficult for Lynn. Klein didn't know whether to feel relieved or sorry for his friend. After thinking for a moment, he said, to play the role of a Warlock, you might join some mysticism clubs and become seen as a Warlock by others. This is a common method. Besides that, you could analyze the deeper meaning behind the title of Warlock. Clearly, although Klein was somewhat shocked by Lynn's rapid advancement, Mr. Fool still chose to share his role-playing experience to help Lynn better digest his potion. Lynn listened quietly. After Klein finished sharing his experience and analyzing the role of a Warlock, Lynn said, Sherlock, I think I understand why the Angel of Secrets guided us to meet. Ah, Klein was puzzled, watching as Lynn gave him a thumbs up and said with a bright smile, you're really a great friend. I'm very glad to have a friend like you. Klein was momentarily stunned. Looking at Lynn's sincere and serious expression, he couldn't help but smile back, saying, what a coincidence, I also think you're a great friend. I'm equally glad to have met a companion like you. It was true. Though Lynn had his quirks and could be a bit goofy and petty, he was indeed a very good friend. Haha, of course, I'm the best friend ever. Lynn said proudly, showing no trace of embarrassment. Klein wasn't surprised by this and continued arranging the scene, unaware that Lynn had suddenly glanced thoughtfully in a certain direction. That direction was where Sharon and Marich had left. It proved wise for Lynn to have his divine avatar follow Sharon and Marich, as an unexpected event did occur. The puppet from the Rose School of Thought appeared earlier than Sharon had anticipated. However, neither the Wraith Steve nor Sharon and Marich noticed this, as before the puppet could join the battlefield, it fell into a fairy tale domain Lynn had created and turned into a donkey. Once upon a time, there was a kind old man named Geppetto. He carved a talking puppet and named him Pinocchio. Lynn held a notebook, casually flipping through it while reciting the story. After finishing the first paragraph, he looked at the donkey puppet, Zadwin, and smiled, although you're not really a puppet and your name isn't Pinocchio, burying you with this story feels quite fitting. Mystical reenactment. The Adventures of Pinocchio. While Lynn told the puppet a puppet story, Klein, having completed his preparations and hidden in the shadows, finally saw Marich and the others in the distance. Though they appeared to be of flesh and blood, as individuals on the mutant pathway, Marich and his companions ran at incredible speeds, with Marich even outpacing the steam trains of the era, highlighting the mutant pathway's enhancements to speed and strength. Klein immediately focused, his gaze sweeping over the two pursuers chasing Marich and Sharon. He could instantly see the difference between these Rose School of Thought pursuers and Sharon and Marich. These pursuers had clearly given in to their desires and madness, becoming dangerously deranged beyonders. The battle began under these circumstances. First, Marich fought the Rose School of Thought's zombie, Jason, resulting in a zombie versus zombie scenario. Then, the werewolf Tyre arrived, trying to assist Jason in a 2-on-1 fight, but Sharon joined the battle, making it a 2-on-2. Klein didn't act immediately but produced a Beander characteristic, the marionettist characteristic from Rosago. Since this characteristic wasn't tainted by the true creator's corruption as in the original story, Klein used it without hesitation. He quickly identified the strongest of the Rose School of Thought pursuers, apart from the demigod puppet, the Wraith Steve, who was like Miss Sharon. His devil revolver then entered death mode, but Klein didn't fire immediately. Instead, he snapped his fingers silently. Brilliant fireworks burst in the abandoned warehouse. Amidst the rising flames, Klein, dressed in a black double-breasted coat and wearing a matching half-high top hat, appeared like a magician, attracting everyone's attention. Klein then quickly fired at the Steve's position. Bang! The bullet, representing the instant death magic of the Sequence 6 Devil, clearly hit its mark. Amidst Steve's scream, he materialized and fell to the ground, looking rather battered. One shot to the soul. Klein looked at Steve. Despite being a Sequence 5 Wraith with strong vitality, Steve didn't die instantly but was severely wounded, just shy of death. Klein wasn't one to miss a finishing shot. He raised his gun to finish him off. However, at that moment, Klein suddenly felt a chill and his body stiffened. Evidently, facing death, the grievously injured Steve chose to forcibly possess Klein. But in that second, a strong golden light burst from Klein's body, pushing Steve further towards death's door and freeing Klein to act. He immediately shot Steve. Bang! In his last moment, Wraith Steve heard a cheerful voice from a corner. "How was my assist?" End of chapter. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Although it might seem like stealing the spotlight, Lynn's timely assistance was undoubtedly crucial. After the Wraith Steve was taken down, Klein chose to help Marich against the werewolf Tyre without hesitation. With Klein, equipped with both the Creeping Hunger and the Devil Revolver, joining the fray, the battle, initially a stalemate due to the Blood Moon, quickly turned in their favor. With Lynn's occasional financial support, the werewolf Tyre and the zombie Jason were soon defeated. As Sharon and others quickly cleaned the battlefield and retreated with their spoils, Klein and Lynn also fled after Klein completed the final act. Unlike in the original story where Klein hid in the Steam Church, this time, he chose nearby St. Samuel Cathedral. Being a Nighthawk and an official informant of the Evernight Church, entering the church felt like coming home. There was no tension from their recent deeds. Instead, Lynn even casually chatted with the priest. As their counterattack concluded and the temporary team dispersed, Lynn's divine avatar had already dealt with the Sequence 4 puppet. However, he didn't leave immediately. While extracting the Beyander characteristics from the puppet and sensing the faint connection to an outer god, he waited leisurely. Lynn was waiting for the Storm Church's archbishop. It wasn't for anything specific. With the upcoming gathering of the gods in the fourth epic, Lynn wanted to greet the Lord of Storms. Naturally, if someone from another church came, Lynn wouldn't mind meeting them either. Therefore, when Archbishop Ace Snake of the Holy Wind Cathedral arrived at top speed, he didn't find a battlefield in disarray or secret organization members fleeing from official Beyonders. Instead, he saw a masked, leisurely blonde man leaning against an ancient tree, playing with a jelly-like substance. Archbishop Snake halted in midair instantly, recognizing the figure below as an angel due to the deliberate display of his divine aura. This made the usually irritable Archbishop uncharacteristically calm. Despite their usual irritability, the members of the Storm Church knew when to be cautious. An angel, in the context of the fifth epic where gods couldn't descend, was a significant presence, almost the highest level of combat power. Although the Holy Wind Cathedral could deal with a typical angel by paying a hefty price, the aftermath would be catastrophic for Backland, with countless casualties. For the sake of himself, the church, and the innocent civilians, Archbishop Snake repressed his temper, scrutinizing the mysterious angel and trying to deduce his identity, sequence, and intentions. The angel didn't seem to belong to a corrupt or evil pathway. He's holding a Beyander characteristic, possibly of sequence 4, and seems to be from a rare pathway. Archbishop Snake pondered, suddenly hearing the angel chuckle softly. "I thought you'd greet me with a lightning strike. It seems you Storm Church folks have some patience after all." Archbishop Snake. It's not that he didn't want to, he just couldn't afford to. Starting an angelic battle would be disastrous. "Sir, who are you, and what's your purpose here?" Archbishop Snake eventually decided to ask directly, as he wasn't adept at analyzing. Such tasks were typically left to his church's partners from the reader pathway. "You can call me the Angel of Secrets." Lynn casually gazed at Archbishop Snake in the sky, exuding a mysterious aura. "As for my purpose..." Lynn paused, then smiled. "Convey my regards to the Lord of Storms. I look forward to our conversation at the upcoming gathering." Archbishop Snake's pupils contracted, shocked by the angel's words and unsure if he was being truthful about his connection with the Lord of Storms. "Who exactly are you?" Archbishop Snake tried to ask further, but he received no answers. Lynn's figure blurred and vanished, taking the ancient tree with him, revealing the puppet's corpse, a demigod from the Rose School of Thought. Wait! Archbishop Snake surged forward but failed to catch even a trace of Lynn's figure. Left bewildered, he could only frown at the corpse on the ground. Zetwin of the Rose School of Thought. As a high-ranking member of the Storm Church, Archbishop Snake was familiar with the Rose School of Thought's higher sequences beyonders. While Archbishop Snake frowned, other church leaders finally arrived, albeit later due to the location's proximity to the Storm Church and its ambiguous jurisdiction. Though jointly managed, the area was predominantly overseen by the Storm Church. "What happened, Snake?" Archbishop Anthony Stevenson of the St. Samuel Cathedral asked, as he lacked flight abilities and had to be brought over by a spirit. He discreetly examined the scene, trying to infer the events from the remnants. End of chapter. The battle seems to be of a high level, possibly involving Sequence 2. One side was the Rose School of Thought's Zadwin, and the other side, the Mystery Prior Pathway. This familiar pathway made Archbishop Anthony's eyebrows twitch. Although the Sword of the Goddess had always been responsible for a certain Angel of Secrets, as the head of the St. Samuel Cathedral in the Backland Diocese, Archbishop Anthony could not ignore it, especially since he had received some revelations from the goddess. Therefore, Archbishop Anthony was very clear that the goddess had a special attitude towards this Angel of Secrets and was generally friendly. So, he could basically regard the other party as a semi-ally of the church. However, even seeing the other as an ally, Archbishop Anthony genuinely felt that the other party was extremely troublesome. If he remembered correctly, the other party had recently reported a grand conspiracy to assassinate Duke Negan to the church. Earlier, they had thwarted the descent event of the true creator, and even earlier was the ambassador incident. Although rationality told Archbishop Anthony that the Angel of Secrets had always done good deeds and these matters were most likely unrelated to the angel. But causing so many things in such a short period was still difficult for Archbishop Anthony to not have a subtle feeling. Fortunately, the goddess did not assign these matters to me. No, I can't think this way, it's too impious. Archbishop Anthony drew a crimson moon on his chest, praising the goddess while repenting in his heart. The Church of the God of Steam and Machinery's Archbishop Horamic Haydn then flew to the Spellsinger of God, Ace Snake. Unlike the other two heads of the Backland Diocese, Archbishop Haydn had clearly not arrived in person but sent a semi-mechanical incarnation. He appeared both mechanical and magical. "Why aren't you saying anything? This doesn't seem like you. Where's your fiery temper?" Archbishop Haydn asked in a soft voice, filled with confusion and probing. As someone who neither had contact with the Angel of Secrets nor understood part of the inside story like Archbishop Anthony, Archbishop Haydn was undoubtedly the most puzzled at the moment. "I'm not just an angry fool." Archbishop Snake gave Archbishop Haydn a sideways glance. His mind was still echoing the words of the stranger angel. He felt he needed to return to the church quickly and report everything to the Lord. However, before that, Archbishop Snake decided to spend a little time briefly describing what had just happened to his two colleagues. He naturally omitted the part about the Lord of Storms, saying, "I just met an angel who called themselves the Angel of Secrets. Have you two heard of this name?" Sure enough, Archbishop Anthony, who had his suspicions confirmed, was not surprised at all. Archbishop Haydn frowned because he was sure he had never heard of such an angel. After a moment of consideration, Archbishop Anthony said, "I haven't seen this angel, but I know of their existence. The Angel of Secrets can be considered a semi-ally of the Evernight Church." For a moment, the other two archbishops looked at him. Archbishop Anthony's expression remained unchanged. He smiled warmly and said, "But the church doesn't know much about this angel. If you need, I can let you consult some files regarding him." The contact between the Angel of Secrets and the Evernight Church was not a big secret. If the other two wanted to investigate, they could naturally find clues. Therefore, Archbishop Anthony was particularly generous in this regard. After all, to be honest, even if they were given the files, they probably wouldn't learn much. After all, even the Evernight Church, which had the most contact with the angel, knew little about him. The only certainty was that the goddess had a very friendly attitude towards the angel, and the angel was also willing to maintain a friendly stance towards the church. Half of the potion has been digested. How could the effect be so good? While the three archbishops were exploring a certain riddle, elsewhere, Klein, who had left the Evernight Church Cathedral and returned to the Sherlock Detective Agency with Lynn, finally had time to check the progress of his magician potion digestion. But this investigation directly startled Klein, because the digestion was simply too much. According to Klein's initial estimation, even if his acting method was correct, a single performance digesting a quarter of the magician potion would have been very exaggerated. But reality was even more astonishing. Even if he admitted that he acted meticulously, set up the scene beautifully, and had a final exit comparable to a magic show, it was still too much. So much so that Klein felt there was something abnormal about it. And beside Klein, Lynn, who appeared due to the spoils of battle, also showed a surprised expression upon hearing this. But he quickly reacted, poking Klein and saying, "Do you think it's possible that the digestion of the magician potion is not only related to the quality of the performance but also the quality of the audience? I don't know if you are aware, but from what I understand, the feedback is different when the same acting is applied to people of different sequences. For instance, digesting the provoker potion by provoking ordinary people might take several months, but if you can provoke an angel, the provoker potion might digest instantly." Lynn wasn't talking nonsense. The original acting method indeed had this feature. Low sequence beyonders wanted to complete their acting quickly. The best way was to perform in front of high sequence individuals to get some high sequence feedback. However, this acting method was risky, as it could easily backfire and end up with the performer gone. So, unless one had connections, it was not recommended. Klein was stunned for a moment, then clearly thought of a possibility, saying, "You mean this time's event might have attracted the attention of high-sequence members of the church, bringing me extra digestion progress. A normal mid-sequence battle wouldn't attract the attention of high-sequence church members. But their event this time involved a sequence 4 in the Angel of Secrets. It's possible that high-ranking church officials examined their battle site for more clues. After all, as long as they weren't foolish, most people would connect the two battles." That's indeed a possibility. Lynn nodded seriously, then lightly coughed and said, "But is it possible that I am also considered a high-quality audience?" Lynn's speculation was not without reason. After all, he was using a divine avatar. Even though the power borrowed was from the avatar, the consciousness was shared. In the same space-time, it's hard to say if the potion digestion would consider him as a sequence 7 audience or a high-sequence audience. After all, potion digestion often didn't make much sense. Klein was stunned for a moment, his eyes widening slightly, clearly understanding Lynn's words. But then he was a bit puzzled, saying, "But even if you were once an angel, you're now just sequence 7. End of chapter. But even if you were once an angel, you're now just sequence 7. An ordinary person might panic at this moment, worrying about accidentally revealing their true identity, but Lynn was clearly not ordinary. So, Lynn shrugged and said naturally and innocently, "I don't know. Maybe because I was once an angel, I still retain some angelic characteristics, like status." He glanced at Klein and continued, "Just like you, you also possess a status that ordinary sequence 7s don't." This, of course, referred to Klein's identity as the Fool. Klein coughed unnaturally and explained, "Our situations are different, and, under normal circumstances, I don't possess the status of a higher sequence. Unless I borrow the power of the gray fog." Klein added silently in his heart, "Maybe it's because the Angel of Secrets is beside me, so I get a bit of his status. Although he didn't personally watch your performance, we're not far from him, so maybe the potion judged us as a whole." Lynn did not continue to pressure Mr. Fool, instead proposing a new possibility, which he thought was closest to the truth. That could indeed be possible. Klein thought for a moment. Although it still seemed absurd, he had to admit it was a possibility. Lynn then showed an eager expression and said, "Next time, we can do an experiment. I'll be an audience when you perform, to see if it helps with the digestion of your potion." I happen to know someone who would be a great target for your next performance, Lynn said, smiling. He continued, he is a Sequence 6 Dawn Paladin, a devotee of the Earth Mother. I happened to learn about him. Lynn then recounted the story of Father Utravsky. It was a simple story. Utravsky was once a notorious pirate, but one day he was moved by the Earth Mother's teachings and became a loyal follower, completely reforming himself. However, the divide between his past and present caused Utravsky to develop a split personality. To avoid losing control and causing things to spiral, Utravsky hoped someone could use a special spectator pathway artifact to enter his deepest dreams and confront his past self, allowing him to be reborn. Although Father Utravsky is Sequence 6, his artifact weakens his past self in the dream. With your strength, I think it's manageable, Lynn said, stroking his chin before revealing his true intention. And the key is, if you can defeat his past self and help him be reborn, you might earn his friendship, which could help with a commission of mine. What commission? Klein asked, glancing at Lynn. You know about sanguines, right? Recently, a sanguine in the South Bridge district went missing. His parents commissioned someone to find him. Lynn smiled as if remembering something. Of course, they didn't reveal their sanguine identity. I discovered it during my investigation. But since I took the commission, I'll try my best to complete it. Is that sanguine being held in the Harvest Church? Klein's expression became subtle. Yes, and from my investigation, he might have accidentally wandered into the church and got caught. Lynn gave a knowing look. Klein, wandering into a church and getting caught, how absent-minded is this sanguine? After discovering they were sanguines, I thought about abandoning the commission, but I found out that they are quite harmless. The one imprisoned under the Harvest Church is not just harmless but a bit naive. He even resorted to stealing blood bags from a hospital because he was obsessed with dolls and is too poor. Lynn unabashedly criticized Emlyn White, so I think it's worth saving such a harmless sanguine, but... Lynn's expression turned subtle, I might not need to save him. The next time I visit the Harvest Church, he might have already become a priest of the Earth Mother Church. Klein raised an eyebrow, asking, why do you think that? Because the Earth Mother Church has a tradition of converting sanguines into followers. Lynn shrugged, revealing a secret of the Earth Mother. Almost all captured sanguines eventually reform and embrace the Earth Mother. It seems like a twisted hobby. Maybe it's because the sanguine pathway is adjacent to the Earth Mother's pathway. Klein guessed after hearing this surprising tradition. It wasn't a wild guess, considering the Evernight Church also had Beyonders from the Death pathway. That could be possible, Lynn nodded, then appeared puzzled and melancholic, muttering, but I feel it's not that simple. Lynn's words hinted at a possible anomaly when he would greet the Earth Mother in the Harvest Church. Is there some hidden truth? Klein wondered. He wouldn't ignore Lynn's intuition, even if Lynn hadn't regained his memories or prophetic abilities. Lynn was still special. However, Klein couldn't guess the truth that the Earth Mother was actually Lilith in disguise. After a moment of wild guesses, he decided to put this matter aside and said, after tomorrow's blood moon, we can visit the Harvest Church. Klein was also curious if Lynn's presence could help digest his potion faster. If it could, it would be a boon, allowing him to complete his promotion more quickly. Klein was confident in dealing with a weakened Dawn Paladin, especially after today's battle had given him a better understanding of his strength post-promotion. And he was curious about the sanguine imprisoned in the Harvest Church and his level of naivety. Let's find a time to go then. Lynn nodded, sensing something and glancing towards the abandoned warehouse before continuing to sip his tea. End of chapter. Meanwhile, at the abandoned warehouse where the battle previously took place, there had already been numerous groups of official Beyonders coming and going. The people present at the abandoned warehouse now were of significant importance. Yes, 3 archbishops who had been elsewhere not long ago had now gathered in front of this abandoned warehouse. Not far from them, a man named Ekenzer Bernard, holding an ancient silver mirror with intricate patterns, couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. As a deacon of the machinery hivemind, Ekenzer wouldn't typically lose his composure in front of 3 archbishops. The reason for his anxiety was the infamous mirror of societal death, Erodes, in his hands. Although he hadn't yet used the Erodes mirror, as someone who had suffered under it before, Ikenzer could already imagine his future. I'm finished. My reputation will be ruined throughout the entire Backland church circle by tomorrow. Although he felt bitter, but he couldn't say anything. Let's begin. Archbishop Haydn glanced at Ikenzer. Although puzzled by his unusual nervousness, Haydn, known for his kindness to subordinates, didn't press the matter, simply speaking amiably. Archbishop Anthony and the Archbishop Snake also fixed their gazes on Ikenzer, or rather on the Erod's mirror in his hand, awaiting clues from the sealed artifact. Yes, Archbishop Haydn, Ikenzer gritted his teeth, trying to calm himself. After taking a deep breath, he solemnly asked, Honorable Erodes, my question is, who were the participants in the events that just occurred here? As Ikenzer asked, the surrounding darkness seemed to shift. The surface of the silver mirror rippled with light, and soon a complete image formed. In the rising flames, a figure floated midair. He wore a silk top hat and a black double-breasted long coat, his body distorted and face blurred, with hints of makeup visible. The figure stepped onto the dazzling fireworks and coldly raised a gun. The scene then shifted to a middle-aged man in a dark red cloak, who seemed to be the target. The man's fall was clearly depicted. Scenes transitioned rapidly, showing a woman in a complex black court dress with light golden hair, and a man with black hair. However, their faces were indistinct, making identification impossible. The vision concluded with bright flames and bursting fireworks, in which the man in the black coat reappeared. Under everyone's gaze, the man faced forward, placed his hat over his chest, and bowed slightly like a top-tier magician concluding his performance. Even knowing this would happen, the blatant favoritism still made a hidden angel of secrets in the corner mentally scoff. The Erod's mirror wasn't just secretly helping Mr. Fool debut, it had added layers of filters, emphasizing mystique and grandeur. Erod's was indeed Mr. Fool's #1 admirer, assisting even before Mr. Fool knew of its existence. Should I reveal a bit about his loyal little mirror to Mr. Fool? Lynn mused, finding the idea appealing. Erod's unique traits could provide some amusement for Mr. Fool. Yes, Lynn hadn't initially thought of Klein's suspicion because he had arrived earlier near the warehouse where Klein and others fought, intending to observe the mirror. Lynn was certain Klein's high potion digestion wasn't due to the Lord of Storms or others. Now that the three archbishops had seen Erod's filtered version, they might even aid Klein's digestion process from a distance. And since I've seen this version too, if my main account and I are considered one entity, my repeated viewing shouldn't add to Klein's digestion, but if otherwise, it could. Lynn pondered, unconcerned about Klein's rapid advancement. A faster start could lead to a more leisurely later stage, with more time available. Klein was already accustomed to fighting Sequence 6 and Sequence 5 enemies, maintaining stable mental health without signs of losing control. Early advancement seemed beneficial. Lynn hoped Klein would have time to consolidate his state after advancing to higher sequences. In the original timeline, Klein's rapid late-stage advancement correlated with his strained mental state, partly due to the inability to return home and the relentless pressure of ascending, combating divinity within. Thus, Lynn wished his friend could advance more leisurely, considering the apocalypse was still over a decade away. Even if Amon arrived, Lynn could help fend him off, negating any rush. Lynn didn't want Klein to become a fragile flower, but he also didn't wish for him to be overly lonely and exhausted. If Mr. Fool can stabilize post-advancement, he wouldn't fall asleep immediately after becoming half Lord of Mysteries. Lynn muttered internally, hoping Klein would soon become the Lord of Mysteries, a powerful ally. But as a friend, Lynn prioritized Klein's happiness. If only there were a way to address the awakening of ancient consciousnesses, solving Saucerier's issue, and easing Klein's burden. Lynn sighed inwardly, then refocused on the Erod's mirror. Why didn't my main account appear in the mirror? It only showed 6 people, excluding me. Did Erod's sense my disguise? As Lynn contemplated, the Erod's mirror displayed lines of text, not addressing Lynn but Ikenzer. According to the principle of reciprocity, it's my turn to ask. If you answer incorrectly or lie, you will be punished. The word, punished, appeared blood red, as if dripping. Despite anticipating this, Ikenzer's face contorted momentarily before becoming solemn, with a hint of hopelessness. Under Lynn's intrigued gaze, Erod's mirror questioned Ikenzer, what is your sexual orientation? Ekenzer was instantly shocked, as if he is struck by lightning. End of chapter. Ekenzer was dead. In front of everyone, he experienced a societal death, hugging the mirror of Erodes, and floated away like a ghost. Ahem. After Ekenzer, deeply shaken both mentally and physically, went to rest under the watchful eyes of his teammates, Archbishop Haydn lightly coughed and nonchalantly said, "Before today, the Church of Steam had received intelligence suggesting a possible split within the Rose School of Thought. Judging by today's events, that intelligence appears to be accurate." In a way, Archbishop Haydn was considerate of his subordinates. Although he had no objections to their private matters and adopted an attitude of respect and blessing, the culture in Loen was relatively conservative. Discussing some things in private was acceptable, but publicly disclosing them could harm the individual's reputation. Therefore, pretending nothing happened was the best outcome. The Evernight Church also received similar intelligence. Archbishop Anthony nodded slightly. He, too, had no intention of exposing the private affairs of other church members. However, a familiar face surfaced in his mind. Yes, that person was the rising star of the Evernight Church, who took less than 3 months to advance from an ordinary person to Sequence 7, a peerless genius, the only designated contact of the Angel of Secrets, and a favored one of the Evernight Goddess, Klein Moretti. Indeed, Archbishop Anthony knew Klein Moretti's identity as a favored one of the Evernight Goddess. As the head of the Backland Diocese, Archbishop Anthony was privy to more information and received more divine messages from the goddess than others. Therefore, while Sword of the Goddess Crestet Sesimir was marveling at how much the Evernight Goddess valued Klein, thinking he might become a favored one in the future, Archbishop Anthony had already received part of the script and knew Klein Moretti was indeed the goddess's true favored one. However, due to the divine instructions, Archbishop Anthony did not widely publicize this matter. He simply monitored Klein Moretti and provided assistance when necessary, such as giving special approval for Klein Moretti's rapid promotion a few days ago. As a result, although the person in the mirror had become so blurry that distinguishing their features was impossible, Archbishop Anthony still guessed that the most prominent figure in the recent projection was their newly anointed favored one. Upon reflection, this was not surprising. Klein Moretti had always been involved in matters concerning the Angel of Secrets. One could say that whenever the Angel of Secrets caused trouble, Klein Moretti was present. Given that the Angel of Secrets had stirred things up again, it would be odd if the favored one was absent. Xmas. However, since the matter involved the Angel of Secrets, the favored one, and internal strife within the Rose School of Thought, it was necessary to report this to the goddess. Moreover, Archbishop Snake's reaction was quite off. It was likely the Angel of Secrets had said something to him. Archbishop Anthony's mind raced, but he had no intention of revealing the hidden information he knew. Sharing unavoidable intelligence was one thing, but Archbishop Anthony had no intention of generously sharing any hidden information with the other two churches. The 3 churches had never been close enough to share all secrets. In other words, the current situation is that there's infighting within the Rose School of Thought, and that Angel of Secrets is a member of the Rose School. Archbishop Snake suggested the most obvious guess. I lean more towards the idea that they are external support for the Temperance faction, Archbishop Anthony said with a smile. The likelihood of external support is indeed greater, Archbishop Haydn nodded slightly. After a few more words of discussion, the 3 archbishops basically analyzed the sequences of those involved in the battle, including Klein. Archbishop Anthony then smiled and said, "The situation is quite clear. There is a split within the Rose School of Thought, and members of the Temperance faction are being hunted by the Indulgence faction. However, the members of the Temperance faction are clearly not weak and have called in external support, 2 Beyonders to fight alongside them, and the Angel of Secrets. There are now 2 questions. First, how did the Temperance faction manage to enlist the help of the Angel of Secrets? Do they have a hidden high sequence member backing them? Considering the Temperance faction's usual conduct, if they do have such a high sequence member, it might not be necessary to suppress them. We could consider recruiting them. Second, what are the Angel of Secrets' intentions in participating in this matter? Is it purely to help the Temperance faction escape their pursuers, or is there a deeper purpose? What does he aim to achieve, and will this pose a threat to the Church or Backland? Archbishop Anthony's analysis was logical and reasonable. Apart from inadvertently letting a certain favored one slip under the radar and withholding useful information, there were no faults. Archbishop Haydn nodded thoughtfully at this analysis. Archbishop Snake frowned and finally said, "So, we still have no clues about the Angel of Secrets." Clearly, for Archbishop Snake, his primary concern wasn't the infighting within the Rose School of Thought but the Angel of Secrets himself. This wasn't his fault. Anyone would be rattled after hearing what Lynn said. What did the Angel of Secrets say to him? Archbishop Anthony glanced at the Archbishop Snake and smiled. It seems there are no more clues here. If you're in a hurry, we can go now to check the archives on the Angel of Secrets. The three archbishops naturally had no idea that while they were discussing the Angel of Secrets, a certain person was squatting in a corner, silently watching them. Only after the three archbishops left to review the archives did Lynn brush off non-existent dust from his body, glance at the Mirror of Erodes, and vanish on the spot as a divine avatar. So now, I can consider myself officially revealed to the three official churches of Loan. The Evernight Church is aware of me. We are in a mutually testing stage, generally leaning towards friendliness. They have not taken drastic measures despite knowing about my past changes, indicating room for negotiation. There is a high likelihood of cooperation in the future. On the other side, Lynn, who was synchronously receiving all information from his divine avatar, sipped tea and calmly analyzed the current situation. TN. Surprise request for a review. If you haven't given it a review yet, it would mean a lot if you could. If you already have, thank you very much. End of chapter. The Steam Church has nothing more to say. When I decided to ascend as a paragon, I was destined to be their enemy. However, if I could directly replace the god of steam and machinery, perhaps I could turn their church into mine. Lynn contemplated the feasibility of this and found it somewhat possible. Although the history Lynn altered didn't seem to produce a direct butterfly effect, as seen with Medici in the fourth epic influencing the fifth epic Medici's state, the changes still existed, just between corresponding points without affecting the middle parts. So, if Lynn ascended as the god of steam and machinery in the fourth epic, similar to Medici's case, the most likely outcome would be that the Steam Church would still appear and develop as it has, but the current god of steam and machinery might be replaced by Lynn. If this happens, there's another issue. My second Smurf account hasn't reached this era yet, so theoretically, I wouldn't encounter it, just like I can't see my other two Smurf accounts now. Lynn furrowed his brow as he pondered this. But if I replace the god of steam and machinery, the deity of this era will lose their sequence 0 status, just like Medici. This means my Smurf account hasn't arrived yet, and the Steam Church, even if their faith shifts to me, will temporarily lack a sequence 0. Will the Steam Church be without a sequence 0 for a while? Or perhaps, some unknown change will occur, like my second Smurf account crossing time to arrive in this era. Or maybe I, as the main body, will directly use the Smurf account's power. Lynn found this a worthy topic to explore. His intuition told him that once his Smurf account officially ascends to sequence 0, some special changes might indeed occur. Just like the change from 0 to 1, before the Smurf account ascends to sequence 0, everything is virtual. Only by stepping into that domain can some additional changes be brought about. And Lynn always trusted his intuition. From this perspective, my idea of ascending as a great old one is undoubtedly correct. Lynn nodded, mentally giving himself a pat on the back before continuing to ponder. As for the grumpy storm pigeon, let's see how he reacts to my words. Even if relations are poor now, we can discuss it at the upcoming God's Tea Party. Thinking of this, Lynn couldn't help but smile. Due to the different flow of time, although only a few hours had passed in the fifth epic, several days had gone by in the fourth epic. During this time, Lynn, Bethel, Amon, and Antigonus finally succeeded in creating the special space Lynn wanted. And now, the tea party was very close. Lynn felt a genuine sense of anticipation for this. At the tea party, the first thing I need to discuss with the Evernight goddess is about the god of steam and machinery and my ascension as a paragon. Lynn decided, setting the tone for the upcoming God's Tea Party. Then, I'll talk to Solomon and the True Creator about establishing the True Creator's Church in the Solomon Empire and about my mechanical angel Smurf account. Hopefully, Little Red can gather high-sequence information about the Solomon Empire during this time. As for the Earth Mother, I should discuss the Sanguine in opposing the Mother Goddess of Depravity, using the traditional carrot-and-stick approach to gain her support. As for the Grumpy Storm, I hope he realizes the inevitability of the original creator's appearance. But there's no rush to discuss this. I'll talk about the Eternal Blazing Sun first. Lynn mentally reviewed the topics to ensure he wouldn't forget them during the tea party if he got carried away with enjoyment. Lynn was self-aware enough to know that while he could handle business amidst fun, forgetting the important matters when engrossed in play was still quite possible. As for whether the gathered deities and angels would conflict or secretly collude for deals during the tea party, Lynn didn't care. His responsibility was to ensure the tea party's safety and that no participants would get hurt. What they might conspire about during the party was not his concern. Speaking of which, the last gathering of such big shots was the Rose Redemption, right? I wonder if Evernight and the others will feel a sense of déjà vu. Recalling the original work, Lynn didn't find anything ominous in this. He put down his teacup and looked at Klein, who suddenly furrowed his brow and seemed puzzled, and asked, "What's wrong, Sherlock?" "Something happened. My magician potion seems to have digested a bit more," Klein answered, genuinely puzzled. "About 1/6 now. Doesn't sound like a bad thing," Lynn said, rubbing his chin. "Maybe this is the high-level feedback from the church, and the previous digestion was from my influence." "But only 1/6 from 3 sequence 3s. Lynn squinted slightly. "Although the gap between sequence 2 and sequence 3 is significant, is it really that vast? Or is it the impact of indirectly watching performances? Or maybe, besides him, there were other high-sequence spectators digesting Klein's potion?" Thinking of a certain wall-squatting expert, Mr. Adam, Lynn blinked and said, "Speaking of which, Sherlock, I've had a feeling for a while. I thought it was a hallucination, but with your potion's digestion progress, it might not be." "What feeling?" Klein asked, puzzled, as Lynn prepared to tell another spooky story. "I've always felt like there was another person at our battle scene." Lynn frowned, adopting a confused look. "It's not the Angel of Secrets, but someone else. I couldn't see them, but I had a feeling, like I'm very familiar with the sensation of someone lurking in the air, so even if I couldn't see them, I could vaguely sense them." Whether Adam was there or not, Lynn decided to pin the suspicion on him first. End of chapter. Whether Adam was observing Klein's magic performance was undoubtedly an unknown. However, Lynn wasn't particularly concerned about the possibility of Adam lurking in the air. Firstly, considering Lynn's actions since crossing over, like seizing 008 and reporting the Apostle of Desire, it wasn't surprising for Adam to take notice of him. Secondly, referencing Adam's attitude in the fourth epic, Lynn believed Adam wouldn't act recklessly. And even if Adam did have some plans, Lynn wasn't very scared. A player with hacks fears nothing. While Klein was a bit scared by Lynn's horror story, without concrete evidence, he could only suppress his emotions and be more vigilant. Evidently, he was already treating the possibility of an unknown big shot lurking in the air as a common situation that needed caution. Lynn was quite gratified by this. Afterwards, Lynn and Klein divided the spoils from dealing with the Rose School of Thought, obtaining a Sequence 7 werewolf characteristic. Although the Wraith Steve was taken down early by Klein, due to the inertia of the plot, the zombie Jason was still exiled by Sharon using a mystical item. Since Marich needed the Wraith Steve's characteristic to advance to Sequence 5, and Steve was killed by Klein, Sharon naturally chose to make up some difference, exchanging the characteristic from Klein. Thus, from this battle, Klein and Lynn's side obtained a bottle of biotoxin, a Sequence 7 werewolf characteristic, the Book of Secrets, for making up the difference, and £3,000. Being an honest child, Klein originally wanted to split these spoils with Lynn as usual. But Lynn refused, stating he was merely assisting this time. So, in the end, he only took the werewolf characteristic, mentioning that a certain angel seemed to need it. Why would he need this? Is there something special about this werewolf characteristic? Klein asked curiously, watching Lynn put the characteristic into an iron box. Not sure, but this thing, well, it's probably not something good. Lynn shook his head innocently, pocketing the box as he spoke. I don't know if you felt it, but this characteristic gives me a bad feeling, like whoever uses it to advance is doomed. But perhaps that's precisely why that guy needs it. Hearing this, Klein, who hadn't yet divined the werewolf characteristic on the gray fog, instinctively frowned. After thinking for a while, he guessed. Miss Sharon said the chained god's control over the Rose school of thought surpasses normal imagination. Could it be because of this? Like whoever consumes this characteristic to advance will be noticed by the chained god. A god's attention would undoubtedly be disastrous for an ordinary Beyander. That's indeed possible, Lynn nodded. The original story did mention the werewolf characteristic having issues, generally bringing outer god attention to whoever used it. The only uncertainty was whether the attention was from Bitch Tree or the mother goddess of depravity. Considering the complex relationship between the two, one masquerading as the chained god to lead the Rose school of thought, the other misleading many followers under the guise of the primordial moon, with many followers within the Rose school, it was hard to say if the original Sharon was first noticed by Bitch Tree before falling to the primordial moon or if the werewolf characteristic was initially marked by the primordial moon. However, for Lynn, it didn't matter. Whether it was the primordial moon or Bitch Tree, both were enemies he planned to deal with in the future. Lynn was more curious if he could use this connection to call the other side. This was why Lynn chose the werewolf characteristic among the spoils. He lacked neither mystical items nor knowledge. As for money, Lynn was confident that as long as Mr. Fool continued to use mystical items, his money would eventually flow into Lynn's pocket as commission fees. So why not let the money stay in Klein's pocket a bit longer? Only by having and then losing, it hurts more, right? Mr. Fool, of course, didn't know about this malicious thought. He just showed a thoughtful expression, guessing that the Angel of Secrets might plan to use the characteristic against the chained god. Klein was happy to see this and, looking at Lynn, said, "But this way, you get no spoils at all. How about I still split? No need. I don't lack the things you have. If you feel bad, just copy the Book of Secrets for me." Lynn waved his hand. "All right, if you insist." Klein gave up when he saw Lynn was serious. "Actually, I'm more curious about what will happen tomorrow night than what the Angel of Secrets plans to do." Lynn shifted the topic, speaking casually. Tomorrow night. Klein instinctively looked at the crimson moon, equally curious about what the prophecy about Furs would entail. How would Miss Furs reunite with them? Due to the bottle's high spiritual consumption, Klein didn't chat long with Lynn before retiring to rest. After bidding farewell to Klein, Lynn returned to 16 Minx Street. Upon entering, Lynn saw his divine avatar sipping tea on the sofa. He wasn't surprised and, while closing the door, smiled and said, "Thank you." Speaking, Lynn walked quickly to the divine avatar, sat beside him, and took out the iron box containing the werewolf characteristic, saying while opening it, "This werewolf characteristic is indeed connected to an outer god, but I can't determine which one yet since I'm only sequence 7 and my senses aren't precise." As a skilled actor, Lynn continued the double act even when alone. After all, who could guarantee he was truly alone? Thus, hearing this, the Angel of Secrets glanced at the werewolf characteristic in Lynn's hand, took it, squeezed it, and carefully sensed it, saying, "It doesn't feel like Bitch Tree. The presence linked to this characteristic is likely the mother goddess of depravity." While saying this, the Angel of Secrets pulled out another characteristic, that of the demigod puppet who chased Sharon and Marich. "This characteristic is also tainted. I sensed Bitch Tree's influence on it," the Angel of Secrets briefly explained, as if Lynn wasn't in sync with his thoughts. End of chapter. Mother Tree of Desire and the Mother Goddess of Depravity. Tisk. Such a small incident involving two outer gods. Sharon and Marich are indeed quite influential. Lynn pretended to take a deep breath, marveling at the corrupted facts, and finally swept his gaze over the two characteristics. Stroking his chin, he asked, "So, who do you think we should try calling first?" Normally, no one would proactively establish contact with an outer god, but Lynn didn't care. He was very confident he wouldn't be corrupted by an outer god, as evidenced by his previous confrontation with the Bitch Tree. Hence, Lynn's mischievous nature was stirring at this moment. "We've already had contact with the Bitch Tree before. I believe it should have a deep enough impression of us." Under such circumstances, it might directly cut the connection when it senses our presence. The Angel of Secrets analyzed slowly, his gaze falling on the werewolf characteristic. So I think the Mother Goddess of Depravity, whom we haven't officially contacted, is more suitable. Although the Goddess of Depravity might have observed the battle where Lynn beat the bitch tree, observing is different from participating. Lynn felt that it didn't have as deep an impression of him as the bitch tree. And the Angel of Secrets slightly curled his lips. With our abilities, if we successfully establish contact with the Mother Goddess of Depravity, we might be able to reverse engineer corruption. You're right, Lynn nodded seriously, as if it wasn't him who had controlled the divine avatar to make such remarks. Then, Lynn and the Angel of Secrets exchanged glances, and the latter very consciously picked up the werewolf characteristic, starting to pray the primordial moon using the remaining influence on it. To enhance the praying effect, the Angel of Secrets even chanted the primordial moon's honorific name softly while praying. The one and only crimson moon. The symbol of life and beauty. Mother of all spiritual forces. As he prayed, the Angel of Secrets' aura subtly changed. He still seemed like a Sequence 2 angel, yet he had established a connection with the unknown true self. Clearly, despite Lynn's nonchalant words, he decided to play it safe, prepared to give the primordial moon a surprise if it tried anything. Of course, Lynn was doing this to better analyze certain knowledge later. Lynn had discovered that while his intuition told him not to directly pray to true self for knowledge, some tricky methods still existed, such as briefly borrowing the omniscient and omnipresent perspective of true self when using its power. The power lent by true self was never merely about temporal authority, it contained more complex elements. Previously, Lynn had intentionally or unintentionally ignored this until he needed it now. As the Angel of Secrets continued praying, he suddenly felt something in the cosmos noticing his prayer. Following this notice, the Angel of Secrets also saw the other party, witnessing the crimson moon covered in flesh, the enormous and bizarre yet inexplicably beautiful and life-imbued outer god, and a hapless black emperor trapped between life and death, located in a certain mausoleum. It seemed like something depraved descended at the same moment. However, as soon as the corruptive depravity touched the Angel of Secrets, it disappeared like snow melting in warm water. Simultaneously, the Angel of Secrets opened his eyes, which now seemed to hold endless brilliance. He glanced at the crimson moon, and then the brilliance vanished. In the next second, Lynn seemed to hear a scream, yet perhaps he didn't. However, the fragile connection established with the Mother Goddess of Depravity broke instantly, the connection was forcibly cut. But Lynn no longer cared about that. He swiftly deactivated the divine avatar and then retrieved several cherished paintings from under the coffee table. They were Amon Explodes, Mr. Fool at the Tarot Club, Saucier at Work, and other pictures representing Lynn's humanity. Lynn browsed through these paintings for about 10 minutes before finally leaning back on the sofa, gasping for breath and patting his chest with relief. That scared me to death, almost got myself killed. What happened just now was simple. Lynn's unknown true self had glanced at the Mother Goddess of Depravity through his divine avatar. His true self didn't truly descend into this world, nor onto Lynn. It merely glanced at the Mother Goddess of Depravity through their connection. Whether the Mother Goddess of Depravity was severely injured from this glance, Lynn didn't know. What he knew was that he nearly exceeded his assimilation limit. Why did it interest the entity? Was it because of the Mother Goddess of Depravity's corruption? But that corruption didn't affect me. The bitch tree also tried to corrupt me before. Is it because I didn't establish a connection with the bitch tree, while the Mother Goddess of Depravity corrupted me through the connection? Or is the Mother Goddess of Depravity more special than the bitch tree? After calming down, Lynn pondered the recent events, feeling utterly confused about what had interested his true self. Luckily, his true self seemed merely curious and just glanced over here without other actions. Otherwise, he would have been doomed today. It seems I'll need to be more cautious with such actions in the future, no more rash moves. Lynn sighed, then perked up. Although there were some surprises, contacting the Goddess of Depravity wasn't without gains. First, he gained some intelligence on the Goddess of Depravity, like her abilities and authority. Secondly, Lynn analyzed part of the Goddess of Depravity's corruptions. Though incomplete, It provided some clues on how to clear the corruption, though still far from practical application. Lastly, and most importantly, although the connection with the goddess of depravity was severed, Lynn found his link with a certain emperor had unintentionally become clearer. However, Lynn was unsure if True Self's glance had affected Russell. For instance, the scream he heard earlier, besides the mother goddess of depravity, he felt he heard a male voice too. End of chapter. Russell shouldn't be so unlucky, right? But that voice doesn't sound like Bethel's either. Lynn held a pile of paintings, his expression subtly conflicted, tinged with a bit of eagerness and hesitation. For Lynn, there was a very simple way to know if Russell had been affected by the glance of True Self. Just follow the connection they had just established and take a look. Under normal circumstances, Lynn would have attempted to peek at Russell's situation without a second thought, but after the recent events, he found himself hesitating for once. But Russell is different from the mother goddess of depravity. He is just a corrupted sequence zero. Moreover, the connection is already established. Sooner or later, I will have to follow the network and take a look. As a decisive person, Lynn only struggled internally for 3 seconds before making up his mind. He was going to use the connection with Russell to see his current situation. Without further ado, Lynn placed the paintings he was holding on the table and took a deep breath. He then snapped his fingers, and the recently dismissed divine avatar reappeared. Although, I have to say, you are really awful, main body. I just exploded once, the Angel of Secrets complained, but his expression remained calm. He seemed to be complaining about the main body, but in reality, Lynn was using the complaints to soothe his own emotions. Is this your first day knowing I'm awful? Lynn glanced at the Angel of Secrets with no sense of guilt, rather he seemed quite proud. He even urged, stop dawdling and quickly check on Russell. If something unexpected happens again, I promise I'll cancel you immediately. I think the phrase you always say to Saussure fits you perfectly. The Angel of Secrets looked at Lynn and said, resist the tyranny of the main body, the world belongs to the Avatar. Good luck. Lynn responded with an encouraging expression. Joking aside, after soothing his slightly tense emotions, the Angel of Secrets closed his eyes, letting his perception extend along the connection established with Russell. His sight followed this connection, first seeing a primitive island, then the view descended into a tomb. It was clearly the Black Emperor's tomb, with every carving filled with an asymmetrical aesthetic that made Lynn frown. At the deepest part of the tomb, Lynn saw a huge iron black high-backed chair. In front of it, a black figure was lying on the ground in a prone position, reaching out with one hand, making a fist with all fingers except the middle finger, pointing upwards while groaning in apparent pain. Lynn, Russell, what are you doing? Is this the time to play around? For a moment, Lynn didn't know what to say. He realized that Russell had indeed been affected, but probably because the main body's glance was primarily aimed at the goddess of depravity, Russell, as collateral damage, wasn't in a particularly bad state and might even have benefited a bit. The connection between the goddess of depravity and Russell was effectively severed, and although the corruption on Russell wasn't completely cleared, Lynn could tell that his state wasn't as dire as described in the original text. In fact, after this incident, Russell, who should have been mostly confused and under the influence of the goddess of depravity, had regained his clarity. Although this clarity's duration was uncertain, for now, it was evident that Russell was clear-headed. So, should I greet him? Lynn stroked his chin, his eyes sweeping the tomb, and then he started to act. Just like how Mr. Fool in the original text could use the connection with Russell to create a temporary communication figure in the Black Emperor's tomb, Lynn, with his inherently unique abilities, could do something similar despite not having Saphira Castle. Soon, a young man with golden curly hair and pale gray eyes appeared in the tomb. Lynn, accustomed to multitasking, attached a wisp of his consciousness to this temporary body. He then blinked and threw himself on Russell, exaggerating and mockingly lamenting, Emperor, Emperor, what's wrong? Emperor, don't die. I haven't read your The Taste of a Demoness is really good, diary to Bernadette yet. I haven't told her that her father is not only a scumbag but also a plagiarist. How can you die now? Your diary contents haven't been made public yet, nor have they become a laughingstock among transmigrators. You can't die like this. As he lamented, Lynn saw Russell's outstretched hand trembling as if he had Parkinson's disease. He immediately held that hand down, speaking solemnly. I understand. You want me to read all your diaries to Bernadette, don't you? Rest assured, I will fulfill your last wish. I'll not only translate it word by word, but I'll also drag Bonneva along. I'm sure he, as your younger son, would also want to know about his father's great achievements. Russell's hand stopped trembling. He finally raised his head, revealing a black face without features. The shadow began to change, transforming into a normal human face within seconds. Not only that, Lynn saw the entire black figure lying on the ground change from an undefined shadow to a man. The man was quite handsome, with chestnut long hair and blue eyes, sporting a small mustache. What surprised Lynn was that the normal human-shaped Russell was wearing a black crown encrusted with various gems, which didn't fall off his head despite defying gravity, possibly due to some Beyonder ability. Moreover, Russell was dressed in pitch-black armor with a matching cloak and had a scepter by his side, which appeared out of nowhere. Lynn observed the dramatically changed Russell, pondered for 3 seconds, and then realized the Black Emperor card. Indeed, the current image Russell used matched the description of the Black Emperor card in the original text. However, since Lynn hadn't seen the Black Emperor card in reality, it took him a moment to align the two. Since you have my cards of blasphemy, we can't be considered enemies. Russell finally spoke, getting up from the ground and nonchalantly dusting off non-existent dust. He continued in an accusatory tone, are you sure you want to do something so outrageous? End of chapter.